There's a retired Marine colonel on Fox News right now saying something that could change the entire trajectory of this conflict, and nobody seems to have noticed. He said the 2 U.S. warships that transited the Strait of Hormuz over the weekend went back and forth and didn't find any mines. If that's true, if Iran's mine threat was a bluff, or if the mines were far fewer and less dangerous than Tehran claimed, then the entire basis for the strait's closure begins to collapse. Not through military force, through the simple act of sailing through and surviving. But first, the other 2 stories that broke today. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is hosting both the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors at the State Department. These are the first direct talks between the 2 nations in over 3 decades. The Fox segment mentioned this almost in passing, sandwiched between blockade updates and Trump's posts about European windmills. It deserved the lead. Here's why.
Right now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the State Department hosting both the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors. Now, we'll note, those two nations who represent us in those countries, remind us that those 2 nations are holding their first direct talks since 1993. They do agree on the need to disarm Iran's terror army in Lebanon, Hezbollah. And this development. There are multiple reports that the U.S. and Iranian officials are discussing a second round of peace talks, maybe as early as this Thursday. Here is President Trump.
I can tell you that we've been called by the other side. They'd like to make a deal very badly, very badly.
What was the sticking point over? You said it was over nuclear.
It was over nuclear, very similar, yeah, very good. I guess you're listening. It's over the fact that they will never have a nuclear weapon. Iran, you marking it down? Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And we agreed to a lot of things, but they didn't agree to that. And I think they will agree to it. I'm almost sure of it. In fact, I am sure of it. If they don't agree, there's no deal.
You saw the president there asking that reporter, you're marking that down, right? Iran will never get a nuclear weapon. Vice President J.D. Vance here with Brett Baer last night.
And I think fundamentally it's a question that would be best put to the Iranians because the ball really is in their court. We've made clear where we're willing, again, to be accommodating, and we've made clear where we absolutely need to see the nuclear material come out of the country of Iran. We need to see the Straits of Hormuz fully open, and this is frankly one of the things where the Iranians tried to move the goalposts during the negotiation. We made very clear that that's unacceptable. We came to the negotiations saying the United States, what we've given here is a ceasefire. We've stopped bombing the country. What we expect the Iranians to give up is a full reopening of the Straits of Hormuz.
Take a look at this. This is why the U.S. Navy began its blockade of Iranian ports yesterday. This is a live look at the map we use to track ship traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. Today, 3 oil tankers have reportedly crossed under various flags that have nothing to do with Iran because those ports are blocked off. There was one flying a flag of China, but had taken off from Dubai, so they let that one through. Central Command just released these brand new numbers on the blockade. Our military parked right there. Get this, more than 10,000 U.S. service members, more than 100 fighter and surveillance aircraft, and more than a dozen warships. Right now, I'm looking at the USS Michael Murphy and the USS Frankie Peterson Jr. in the Persian Gulf. That's an armada. Those warships intercept a vessel, issue a warning, and board it to check it out if necessary, and then it would be detained, rerouted, or released. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy. Peter.
Harris, President Trump has told us that his biggest problem this morning is not just that European countries are not helping the U.S. with the Strait of Hormuz. It is that European countries also are not helping themselves. His latest post says this: Europe is desperate for energy, and yet the United Kingdom refuses to open the North Sea oil, one of the greatest fields in the world. Tragic. Aberdeen should be booming. Norway sells its North Sea oil to the UK at double the price. They are making a fortune. UK, which is better situated on the North Sea for purposes of energy than Norway, should drill, baby, drill. It is absolutely crazy that they don't, and no more windmills. And that is as this U.S. blockade continues.
We have a blockade. They're doing no business. I didn't like seeing boats come out if they were doing business with Iran, but if they weren't, no boats came out. So now Iran is doing absolutely no business, and we're going to keep it that way very easily. Don't forget, the Navy is gone.
The middleman between the U.S. and Iran today is Emmanuel Macron. The president of France writes, it is equally important that the Strait of Hormuz be reopened unconditionally without restrictions or tolls as soon as possible. Under these conditions, negotiations should be able to resume quickly with the support of key parties concerned. Until that happens, Democrats here in the United States are hyping higher prices.
It looks like as long as oil prices keep driving up inflation, interest rates are going to remain higher for longer. This is the Iran war tax.
And the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, said at an event for Semaphore last night that it's going to require a very aggressive timeline for gas prices to come down by the summer, which was the original target.
I'll ask him all about that, Peter. Thank you for that reminder. He'll be on the program with two other members of Trump's team coming up, so watch for that, the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright. In focus now, retired Marine Corps Colonel Mike Jernigan, Heritage Foundation visiting fellow. I'm so glad you're here. When I showed that map of what we have parked around the area of the Strait of Hormuz, what does that tell you about Iran now saying, yeah, we might want to come back to the table?
That's such a good graphic, Harris, because there's about 1,600 ships inside the Strait of Hormuz waiting to get out and about 800 ships waiting to get in. And not all of those are going to or from Iran. And what's interesting is, as you noted earlier, we blockade ports. We don't blockade international waterways. So I'm glad to see that some of the ships that have no connection with Iran are making their way out. And so answering your question, it is Iran's getting a taste of their own medicine. Here in the last month, we've heard that they're going to not let anybody through, and they're going to charge bandit fees to let whoever they want pay the money to get through. And now they're getting squeezed economically as well.
Well, I just had mentioned we'll have the Energy Secretary, the Interior Secretary, and the EPA Administrator on all together live a little bit later to talk about this and other topics. So I won't get to that, but I did want to ask you about this. You talk about pressure on Iran. 435 million barrels a day is being reported in the Wall Street Journal and others that they are losing at this point because of all of their ships that are not able to go through. Now, that they do have some ships that are sitting outside of their own ports, but if you can't move your oil, you can't sell your oil.
That's exactly right. And the military application of this is the exact economics that you have highlighted, is the United States is implanting costs on the Iranian that are not at the expense of American lives. And so I am pleased to see as a military man that we're using our economic arm to help Iran make a good decision and give up their nuclear desires.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I want to ask you, from your military acumen and great service to the country, what did we do right about this situation? Because if Iran really had the ability to take that strait, maybe they would have. But apparently they didn't.
I'm going to answer your question in two parts, Harris. The second part first is maybe they didn't have the ability to take the strait. You're exactly right. They said we mined it. Yet this weekend, the two warships that you mentioned did Freedom of Navigation acts, completely drove back and forth through the strait, didn't find any mines. And so the insurance companies are telling all the ships, it's too expensive for us to go. So by saying they have mines, they've enacted the same action of having mines. So that's one thing, is that I think the Iranians' bluster is being called, that they don't have the ability. The second thing that happened is in the early days of the war, we eliminated a lot of their coastal batteries and their mine-laying ships as one of the initial stages of eliminating the Iranian Navy and eliminating their air defenses and eliminating their ability to shoot the short-range missiles would be the ones that would threaten the strait.
One last one. If we want to force them into the corner about their uranium so that they can't make a nuclear weapon, do we have to go in and get that? Do we have the military forces and might to be able to do that? I think I know your answer, but it's more about the mission.
Right. Again, the answer is in two parts. No, we don't have to get it. We just have to make sure they don't have it. So there's other resources available to us to ensure that they don't have it or that somebody else gets it. But yes, in answering your question, the United States military has the capability to go in and get the nuclear material.
All right. So you say there may be some more mission planning ahead, is what I'm reading between the lines there. Keep them from getting it. Fascinating. Colonel Jernigan, always great to have you. Please come back. Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
If Israel and Lebanon can agree on a framework for disarming Hezbollah, it removes the single biggest obstacle to a lasting Iran deal. Iran has tied the Islamabad negotiations to Lebanon. The U.S. and Israel say Lebanon isn't part of the ceasefire, but if Lebanon itself, its elected government, not Hezbollah, enters direct negotiations with Israel to disarm the proxy force, then Iran loses its leverage on that front entirely. The Lebanese prime minister has already called on Hezbollah to lay down its arms. Hezbollah's secretary general has said resistance continues as long as there is breath. The question is whether the Lebanese government has enough authority and enough exhaustion from 6 weeks of Israeli bombardment that has killed nearly 2,000 people to override Hezbollah's objections. This is the diplomatic track that could actually work, not the Strait, not the uranium. Lebanon.CENTCOM released the blockade's order of battle. Harris Faulkner read it on air. More than 10,000 U.S. service members, more than 100 fighter and surveillance aircraft, a dozen warships, the USS Michael Murphy and USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. in the Persian Gulf. That is not a blockade force. That is a war-fighting fleet positioned to do anything the president orders, from mine clearing to port seizure to resumed strikes on Iran proper. The ceasefire is technically still in effect, but when you park 10,000 troops, 100 aircraft, and 12 warships around a country you just spent 6 weeks bombing, the word ceasefire starts to feel academic. The retired Marine colonel in the segment made an important observation. The United States is implanting costs on the Iranians that are not at the expense of American lives. That's the theory. Economic strangulation instead of kinetic destruction. The blockade as a weapon that doesn't require bullets. The blockade is expected to cost Iran approximately $150 million daily in lost revenue. 30 loaded oil tankers are waiting inside the Gulf. 1,600 ships total are inside the strait waiting to get out. 800 are waiting to get in. That's 2,400 ships, tens of thousands of crew members, billions of dollars in cargo, sitting still. This is the one that could change everything, and it came from the Fox guest, not the hosts. The colonel said the 2 destroyers that conducted freedom of navigation operations over the weekend went back and forth and didn't find any mines. He added that Iran's mine threat may have been largely bluster, that by claiming to have mined the strait, Iran achieved the same effect as actually mining it because insurance companies raised rates so high that commercial vessels wouldn't risk the transit. By saying they have mines, they have enacted the same action as having mines. If this assessment is correct, the blockade might be less about physical control of the waterway and more about psychological control, proving to the London insurance underwriters who set war risk premiums that the strait is safe. Once those premiums drop, commercial shipping resumes regardless of what Iran says. The colonel noted that even if some mines exist, the U.S. has already cleared a route, a Q route in mine warfare terminology, sufficient for safe passage. Not the entirety of the Strait of Hormuz, but at least that route. At a minimum, that's all needed to get the ships through. This is a fundamentally different framing than what we've been hearing for weeks. It suggests the strait problem isn't military. It's actuarial. The solution isn't more warships. It's convincing Lloyds of London. Faulkner asked the question directly. Do we have to go in and get that uranium? The colonel's answer was carefully structured. No, we don't have to get it. We need to make sure they don't have it. Other resources are available to ensure they don't have it or somebody else gets it. Faulkner read between the lines. You say there may be more mission planning ahead. That exchange matters because it suggests the administration hasn't given up on physically removing the uranium, despite Trump's primetime speech suggesting satellite surveillance was sufficient. Other resources, and somebody else gets it, could mean intelligence operations, covert action, or an Israeli mission, rather than an American one. Vance was more direct in his Bayer interview. We need to see the nuclear material come out of the country of Iran. That is a non-negotiable demand for physical removal, not surveillance, not containment, removal. And it's coming from the man who just led 21 hours of failed negotiations and is preparing for round 2. Trump said Iran called and wants to make a deal very badly. Iran has not confirmed this. The pattern is now well established. Trump claims Iran is desperate. Iran publicly denies it. Back-channel communications continue through Pakistan. Multiple reports indicate U.S. and Iranian officials are discussing a second round of peace talks, possibly as early as this week. Vance's debrief from Islamabad was revealing. The Iranian delegation couldn't make a deal because they didn't have authority. They had to go back to Tehran. If the second round happens, the key question isn't what's on the table. It's whether whoever shows up from Iran's side actually has the power to say yes. The segment played Trump's post attacking the UK for not drilling in the North Sea and demanding no more windmills. It played Macron's statement about reopening the strait without restrictions or tolls. Trump's energy policy critique of Europe is a sideshow. Macron's statement is the signal that matters. The French president is publicly saying the strait must reopen toll-free, which directly contradicts Iran's demand for a toll system and aligns France with the American position on freedom of navigation. If France, which blocked U.S. overflights during the war and was repeatedly attacked by Trump, is now publicly backing the U.S. position on the strait, that's a meaningful diplomatic shift. It suggests the post-war coalition on Hormuz may come together despite the alliance damage, not because NATO worked, but because everyone needs the oil to flow. A Democratic senator used that phrase in the segment, the Iran war tax, to describe the economic impact on Americans. The Fox hosts treated it as partisan attack, but the underlying data is real. The IMF projects global growth slowing to 3.1% in 2026. The IEA documented the largest fuel disruption in history. Oil demand is falling as scarcity and higher prices persist. Energy Secretary Chris Wright reportedly said at an event that it will require an aggressive timeline for gas prices to come down by summer, which was the administration's original target. The phrase Iran war tax will poll test well for Democrats heading into the midterms. Whether it's fair depends on whether you believe the war was necessary, but the economic pain is not a talking point. It's a receipt. The ceasefire holds in name. The blockade is in effect. The mines may or may not exist. Israel and Lebanon are talking for the first time in a generation. A second round of U.S.-Iran talks may happen Thursday. China is pushing back. Europe is slowly aligning on strait freedom. Oil is above $100. Gas is climbing. 2,400 ships are waiting. And the administration says victory is at hand while simultaneously parking 10,000 troops, 100 aircraft, and 12 warships around a country whose military is destroyed. If the military is destroyed, who are the 10,000 troops there for? That question, the gap between the rhetoric of victory and the posture of continued war, is the story. It has been the story for weeks, and it will remain the story until either a deal is signed, the bombing resumes, or the world simply decides